Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at the Minnesota Wild. What's going to happen for the Minnesota Wild ahead of the trade deadline, specifically for a pending unrestricted free agent defenseman, Matt Dumba. Is this finally the season that Matt Dumba gets traded out of Minnesota? We're going to take a look at that today. Guys, 89% of the watch time on my videos, you guys aren't subscribed to the channel. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to help us out here at Goal Line Hockey. We just hit 3K earlier this year on New Year's Eve in 2022. So here in 2023, we're looking to get closer to 5K by the end of the year. I want to get a lot of subscribers, so make sure to help us out. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at the Minnesota Wild with Matt Dumba in particular, because I think that the conversation around Dumba has been really since, even the expansion teams have been coming through. The Minnesota Wild always have had to protect their defensemen, and there's always been that question, will they protect Brodin? Will they protect Dumba? And throughout all the expansions, whether they protected them or not, they always ended up staying in Minnesota. And now is the breaking point, because now Matt Dumba is on the final year of his deal, and with young defensemen like Kalen Addison due for a new contract this year, the potential of seeing maybe Carson Lambos coming into the NHL next season, is this the end of the line for Matt Dumba? And if so, could they maybe try and cash in assets for him? So, Bill Guerin has made it clear, if they are to trade Matt Dumba, you got to give an offer that he cannot refuse. And that's kind of been the sentiment. He's not taking any joke offers. Listen, don't throw us some stupid offer. It's got to be a legit offer, or we're not even going to entertain it. I think that's kind of what you're looking at here with Dumba. And I think Minnesota would rather lose him for nothing this year and make the playoffs and potentially go on a run than sell him at the deadline, pick up another first-round pick or whatever, and call it a day and kind of send that into those ripples into the locker room that they sold off an asset. Right? And that's kind of what you want to avoid here. So if there's a way where you could get the best of both, maybe you find a way to do that. And what's interesting here is, you look at some of the guys that are available, there is a couple things they can do. One, they can go for the guy that's got some term on his deal, and you already know the contract. And that is a guy in Vancouver who is a Minnesota native, Brock Boeser. Brock Boeser, who played at the University of North Dakota from Minnesota, his name has been tied to the Minnesota Wild, and I think he would be a perfect one-for-one swap for Matt Dumba. Now, there is a caveat to that. I think it would end up being a three-team trade in that scenario because, well, to be honest, Vancouver's not making the playoffs this year. Do they need to bring in a UFA defenseman in Matt Dumba? Doesn't really make sense for them. So that's where you maybe see a three-team trade where maybe Matt Dumba's contract goes to Vancouver. They take 50% of the salary, retain it, and then they get a first-round pick from a team looking for that defenseman. Maybe it's Buffalo or something to that effect. So that's where things get a little more complicated, but Brock Boeser over in Vancouver could be a nice fit there. Not to mention, you could also go another route, which a pending RFA or a pending UFA that is a young enough guy that maybe you could get on a bridge contract and maybe cash in that way. Michael Bunting in Toronto. I don't think Toronto wants to give up Michael Bunting, but if they could add to the blue line with a guy like Matt Dumba, well, maybe they're more willing to make that move. And considering Dumba, I believe, is from the Ontario area, that could be a really interesting fit. Now, again, Michael Bunting, probably not a guy that the Leafs necessarily want to trade ahead of the deadline. But if they are really interested in adding in the blue line, without mortgaging draft picks and trading Matthew Nyes or that first round pick that they have, well, you got to trade something. And is Michael Bunting necessarily off the table? I don't think so. And considering the fact that they might lose him for nothing this summer and try and add a defenseman now, maybe that's where they end up going. And I think that's something that would definitely. So he's from Regina, Saskatchewan. Okay, so he's not necessarily from Ontario, but you could make the deal work nonetheless, right? So that's the other route you can go. And with the potential of signing Michael Bunting long-term this summer, probably close to a Brock Boeser contract. And here's the third option. You know you're not keeping Matt Dumba, You've got some good defensemen already in Minnesota. Are you willing to trade Matt Dumba straight up 1-for-1 for another rental? And again, this is something where I think the Flyers would also try and pull a Vancouver Canucks here. Maybe try to get someone to, let's say the Flyers are the middleman, right? They'll retain the salary of Dumba for the rest of this season and then flip him for a first-round pick to another contending team, right? James Van Riemsdyk. What if the Minnesota Wild brought in James Van Riemsdyk? Now, those rumors have been thrown out there a lot here over the past week and a half. And what's interesting about this is Bill Guerin has obviously seen a lot of JVR in his time in Pittsburgh. He was with the Pittsburgh Penguins organization before joining the Minnesota Wild as the GM. He saw JVR in Toronto. He saw him in Philadelphia, right, as a rival of the Penguins. So Bill Guerin has seen his fair share of JVR, and I think that could be a real interesting fit for the Wild as, you know, he's a guy that could be a good playoff performer, and I think that, yeah, necessarily he's not that center that they need, you know, and that bigger name guy. It's a guy that could help them, and it doesn't cost them an arm and a leg. And the second you start to throw in a Timo Meier, or, I mean, I've even said, I'll talk about this in a completely other video where I talk about the rest of the Minnesota Wild, but Dylan Larkin, like, is there any way they could pry him out of Detroit? Those, like, you need that bona fide center, right? That's why they've always been tied to team, who's the other guy in San Jose that just got re-signed? Tomas Hertl, right? The Minnesota Wild were really in on Tomas Hertl before he stayed in San Jose, right? They need that center. And I think that's somebody that, in all honesty, they'd rather go for than James Van Riemsdyk. Could they flip someone like a Kevin Hayes? Could they bring in Kevin Hayes and find a way to get that deal to work, right? So there's a couple of interesting things that I could see the Minnesota Wild trying to accomplish here with Matt Dumba. It's kind of, you know, the world is their oyster, per se, with Matt Dumba. But truthfully, I think Bill Guerin likes him in Minnesota. The only reason he would trade Matt Dumba for this kind of move for JVR or Kevin Hayes or something like that is to try and kind of send some shockwaves into the locker room for everybody to kind of reset and get everybody back onto their course. And with where the Minnesota Wild are at, that could potentially happen. Now, am I going to sit here and say, do I really think Matt Dumba is going to get traded? I've made this video every year for the past 3 or 4 years. Quite honestly, no. But in the past 3 or 4 years, am I the most confident now that he'll get traded than any of those other years because he's a UFA? Absolutely. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Would you like to see the Minnesota Wild trade Matt Dumba? And if so, leave some mock trades down below. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you again next time.